Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Burwell, congratulations on your nomination, and thank you as well for taking time to meet with me. We have, of course, serious disagreements about the substance of Obamacare, but as I conveyed to you in our meeting, I am more concerned at the moment. Well, I'm very concerned about the substance, but since we can't change that, I'm very concerned about what's going on with regard to the enforcement of Obamacare and the selective enforcement of Obamacare with regard to certain groups. We've seen exemptions, delays, parts of the law ignored as they pertain to certain favored would appear political groups. One of those is the self-insurance tax, which was imposed on self-insured, self-administered plans to help pay for covering people with pre-existing conditions. And under your direction at OMB, there was a rule issued that carves a lot of plans out from that tax. And I guess my question has to do with whether or not that is appropriate, whether or not that's fair. And I want to read for you a quote that came out shortly after that rule was issued. It said, "Ask for clarification on how the change would affect other plans' rates and fees for 2015 and 2016, Health and Human Services officials said, it is true that the fee will be higher for plans that do not have to pay the fee in 2015 because some plans are exempt." So in your view, is that an accurate statement, that others are going to have to pay a higher tax, the self-insurance or the reinsurance tax, I should say, that's paid by self-insured, self-administered plans because groups like unions got carved out?
Senator, with regard to the specific provision that you're referring to, I think this does fall into trying to improve and find better ways to implement the law. The specifics, while some unions are, this does apply to some, many unions it doesn't apply to, and it applies to other groups. It has to do with the definition as well of self-administered versus third-party administered, and in terms of what the law was trying to do. And the question of, there are places, those are not synonymous terms, and the reason they're not is because what we found as we were moving forward is there actually are plans that are self-administered, not using the third-party administrator. And creating that distinction was a way to provide better clarity, and that's what was intended in terms of what was being done.
My understanding is it does affect about 25% of union plans, and it is something that I believe that they requested. And so, but the question is really a very simple one. I mean, it doesn't require a lot of subjectivity. It's just simply a function of math. If there are groups exempted from that reinsurance tax, does that mean that those who are subject to the tax are going to have to pay higher taxes?
I think the question is what was higher and what was lower is the question of when one is implementing what your starting point is. And so, yes, a smaller group, but what was the actual starting point in terms of what is higher?
But we know what the tax is supposed to raise. It's a finite amount. It was very clear. If you're going to raise a certain amount of revenue, and it's going to be paid by a certain number of people, if that pool shrinks, the people who are left in the pool are going to pay more. And that's simple math. And I mean, I think the answer is yes, and I'd like to hear you say yes.
Senator, I think with regard to what was intended was to implement the law in a better way that was common sense, that was responding to a situation that was not just unions, but and then put the pool, whatever the size of the pool is,
that's theory,
to get the numbers.
This is mathematics. Are people going to pay more? The answer is yes. And that's what I'm saying when it comes to this issue of selective enforcement. And I don't think that's fair. I mean, you've had exemptions now twice for small businesses under the employer exemption. You've had, I think, 20-some exemptions or delays or other parts of the law that have been sort of waived, I guess, just unilaterally. But this particular provision is really problematic for the people who still have to pay the reinsurance tax. And all I'm simply saying is, as a matter of fairness in the way that this is implemented, carving out favored groups shouldn't be the modus operandi. We ought to be going about this in a way that treats everybody fairly under the law. And I don't think you can argue that based on the number of exemptions, the number of carve-outs, the number of delays that have been issued already, that that's the case. And this particular one was a rule that was issued by OMB under your direction.
Senator, with regard to the implementation, I think what one does seek to do is when one finds places where you can implement better within the law, that you seek to do that. With regard to the question of employer responsibility, what we heard is that the private sector was having difficulties in terms of doing the reporting requirements that they would need to do this accurately. And with regard to other complex pieces of legislation, one of which, Part D and others, we haven't had anything as large and complex as this in a while, but we have had examples. As one moves to implement, you do listen and try and implement in a better fashion in terms of trying to hear, listen, and make the transition one that is workable. On the individual side, what one sees is an opportunity for individuals to apply for hardships exemptions in terms of trying to make that transition be a place that works.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of transparency, though, some of these things, these waivers and delays, would you agree to submit, when you get them from the insurance company, the new filing rates that they file for next year? Because, the enrollment date's been delayed now until later this year. The date at which plans get approved has been delayed until I think the day before the election, which is very convenient. But we know they're going to be filing rates. We know there are going to be real-world impacts on these things. And in the interest of transparency, which you've talked a lot about, would you submit to us those rates when you get them from the insurers?
Senator, the issue of premiums and rates is one I think that we all are very interested in and all actually want to see in a directional same way. With regard to the specifics of what HHS receives when and how, that's something in my current role I'm not familiar with and would want to get to the department. What I will say, Senator, is if I am confirmed, that's something that I want to understand and work with you on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Thune. And just very